Welcome to the Ask the Expert. Today we have another question about crossovers. So Mark is asking, what does 2.5 way mean and how is it implemented in the speaker design? So that's actually an interesting question. We covered it a little bit in the quickfire round we did on Christmas. So to understand why do we make a 2.5 way speaker? First of all, a 2.5 way speaker is typically a speaker where you have one tweeter and two identical woofers. And then you have a certain way of implementing it. And I will explain what that actually is. First of all, why do we do it? That is because of something called baffle step. So what is baffle step? What happens is when the woofer is playing, in the higher frequencies, the sound will go directly towards the listener. And as you go into lower frequencies, the sound will become more omnidirectional, which means the bass will be spread in all directions from the speaker, basically like a sphere. And the result of that is that most of the energy in the high frequencies is sent towards the listener, and in the lower frequencies, it's out into the room. That creates what's called a baffle step. So at a certain frequency, depending on the width of the speaker, the level of the bass will taper off a little bit. So you have this, without a crossover, you have this slope to the shape. So we have too little bass, essentially, compared to mid-range and tweeters. So what we do in the speaker, you have to account for that. In a two-way speaker, where it's just like a woofer and a tweeter, what you would do is, in the crossover, you would turn down the level of the mid-range and tweeter to match the woofer output. And that sacrifices sensitivity, but you get an even response. The 2.5 way speaker, what you do is, instead you add another woofer so that the bass output is increased to the level of the mid-tweeters. So we now have increased the sensitivity of the speaker, so the speaker overall can play louder. And it's a very simple way of doing it, and in terms of costs, it's relatively cost-effective, because all you're doing is making a bigger cabinet and an extra woofer, and the crossover is really quite simple to design. So Mark asks, why would you not use a 3-way design if you already have 3 drivers? What's the benefit of doing that versus a 3-way speaker? And that's, again, an interesting question, but the answer is mostly about cost. It's also about simplicity of the speaker. Simpler design can give you some benefits in terms of sound, especially within the different specific cost limit. So if you have 3 drivers, the crossover is more complicated, the baffle design might be more complicated. You still have that issue of the baffle step, so you still need to figure out how do we increase the bass level. That's typically done with using 2 woofers in a 3-way speaker. So now it's not 3 drivers anymore, now it's actually 4 drivers. So again, you are increasing cost. Or you're using a bigger woofer to gain that bass output, which also is more expensive and makes for a bigger speaker that might not fit your living room. So in the end, the decision between a 2.5 way and 3-way comes down to really cost and performance relative to cost, and also how compact a design do you want to make from the loudspeaker.